Hi everyone, I'm Peter Pouliot here from Ampere Computing's developer advocacy team. And today I'm joined by Ed Mast and Greg Walsh of the FreeBSD project and foundation. I'm going to hand it over to them and let them explain kind of what they do briefly for the project. And yeah, we'll go from there. Ed, if you don't mind starting.
Sure. I'm Ed Mast. I'm the Senior Director of Technology for the FreeBSD Foundation, which means that I oversee the technical projects that the Foundation takes on with our internal staff to support the project.
And Greg, if you don't mind, telling us what
Yeah,
you do.
sure, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm Senior Director of Partnerships and Research. So unfortunately, that means one of the things that I do is schedule a lot of meetings on Ed's calendar, which I don't know that he always appreciates. But in all seriousness, principally what I'm doing is working with the companies that use FreeBSD and helping to get them involved in the project, whether that's with and through the foundation or directly with the community, and collecting feedback from them on what the community and the foundation can be doing to help them be more successful with FreeBSD.
Great. So guys, I'm gonna dive right in with the hard questions, right? So the internet was originally built on FreeBSD and Linux, and that like first wave, in some sense with Apache and web servers. It seems that Linux has led the pace of innovation in terms of driving some of that innovation that's occurred after that. Where would you say that what's the key role of FreeBSD in the modern cloud and the modern internet?
Sure. I mean, FreeBSD has been a pioneer in web technologies and in containerization, sort of starting with jails in the end of the 90s, and has long been a player in that space. I think it's fair to say that Linux has definitely had a lot of sort of innovation and a lot of things moving very quickly in the last while. But I'd say I characterize FreeBSD's approach generally as sort of deliberate engineering and deliberate innovation. And so we do things in a very careful and considered way. And I think it's important for us to operate sort of in a standards-based and consensus-based approach. And so, I think we absolutely are in a place where we're looking forward with things like the Open Container Initiative, OCI standards, where FreeBSD can adapt and sort of upgrade pioneering technologies that we had with jails to play in the space where the industry is going these days. So I think FreeBSD has a lot of potential for new development, ongoing development in that space.
But Greg, I'd like to hear. I think you and I have had a conversation about this in the past. Like, why, or how important is it to have multiple open source operating systems in the world, and from that perspective?
Sure. Yeah. Those are two big questions. Well, first I want to add one very quick point to what Ed said in response to your first question, and then I'll dive straight in. I was at the All Things Open conference on a panel with like the Open Source Initiative and folks from the Apache Software Foundation and a few other people. And I remember asking everybody in the audience, and it was a big room, who ran FreeBSD. And, a good number of them raised their hands, but, it was maybe 15, 20% of the room. And I said, okay, keep your hands up. Now, raise your hand if you have a Netflix account. Most of the hands went up. Have an iPhone. Any remaining hands that hadn't gone up went up. Play on a PlayStation. And then everybody. And by the time I was done, everybody's hand was up. So, one of the things that I think the FreeBSD Foundation and community has to do is continuously remind people that FreeBSD is ubiquitous. It may not get the headlines all the time, but it really truly is ubiquitous. So why is it important that there be a diversity? I think that there is a huge amount of, I think, very deserved focus on cybersecurity these days across all technology. Everywhere in the stack, and all types of it, be it proprietary or open source. But open source is getting its fair share of scrutiny, and it needs to, because the bad actors out there are more numerous, more well resourced, and more determined than ever. Right? They're state sponsored, and they're really coming for our data.
Yeah, they got big budgets.
They've got big budgets, right? And they're very determined, right?
Yep.
So we have to be more vigilant than ever, no matter who we are or what type of technology it is that we're building. And so that's true of open source as well. And so so digital diversity is a key component to digital resilience. So you see this when you look at VeriSign. So VeriSign's the company that runs most of the big root DNS servers. They have triple redundancy in their architecture. They run everything on Windows, on Linux, and on FreeBSD. Why? Because there is almost no chance that any attack is going to take down all three of those ecosystems at the same time.
And we're talking, and that's a big statement right there, because we're talking to it like specifically at a software operating system packaging tooling level, right? Like,
yeah,
same application protocol from that perspective, but having diversity on that part of that,
right?
Of that,
Yeah, and you see that with XZ, right? The near miss that, thank God for the engineer at Microsoft that was noticing some performance degradation and was able to determine that it was because of this, very determined sort of supply chain attack against the Linux ecosystem that, had it not been caught, could have had a huge impact on the internet. Well, FreeBSD, and Ed's a member of the FreeBSD security team, so we obviously, were concerned about this and looked at this. The interesting point is that that specific supply chain attack, the XZ attack, now it's not saying that FreeBSD is immune from supply chain attacks, not at all, but that specific one we were immune from. Why? Because the BSDs, all the BSDs, NetBSD, FreeBSD, and OpenBSD, have forever removed all third-party contributed packages that go into the base system. XZ is one of about 100 of these types of contributed packages in the FreeBSD base system. All of them. We remove any accompanying build tooling and tests. Why? Because we don't want to be dependent on them. We don't want to have those kinds of external dependencies. So the parts of XZ that were used by this attacker were never in FreeBSD.
Huh.
They were taken out. So that's why digital diversity matters. So I'm not saying that the FreeBSD way is the right way and that every other operating system should adopt this approach. I'm saying that it's critically important that we have diversity, because diversity is a critical part of our collective defense against, bad actors who are seeking to do all of us harm.
Yeah, the different BSDs have all always had some different ideas on what they focus on, and FreeBSD's focus since the beginning has sort of been on high performance on mainstream architectures, and so that started out, with x86 as the sole focus, but I would say FreeBSD's prime goal is to be a high performance operating system on server class architectures. So, we saw the genesis of Arm64, the Arm64 architecture, and we considered that it had a potential to really become a incredible new player in the server space, where FreeBSD has its sort of long-standing strength. And the foundation, in collaboration with ARM and a CPU vendor, worked with a contracting house and a long-term senior member of the FreeBSD development community to bring up the ARM64 architecture within FreeBSD. And then the FreeBSD Foundation invested a lot of resources as well to bring us to tier 1 status for the FreeBSD 14 release. So ARM64 is one of the 2 tier 1 architectures that we support today.
Can you give us any insight, I guess, in terms of like where you guys are using Ampere equipment today, where and potentially kind of where you see it going forward?
So the FreeBSD Foundation purchased a pair of Ampere servers, and then Ampere kindly donated another set to us that we use for our production workloads. So that includes package building, all of the ARM64 packages, the 30,000 different software packages in our third-party collection, our what we call the ports collection and the package collection. All of those are built on the Ampere servers that we have. We have a machine dedicated to building and testing security releases for security advisories. So when there's a binary patch that we need to release for a security issue, we use the Ampere servers for we use one of the Ampere servers for building those. We use one of the machines as just a member of our CDN, our download network, and so it basically just takes some of the load for distributing packages. And then we have another machine that we have a number of reference jails on. So we have a FreeBSD jail, a container essentially for all of the major releases that we support, and that's made available to our developer community to debug and test porting their software to Ampere to ARM64.
So what you're telling me, Ed, is that Ampere equipment's pretty embedded in the day-to-day workflows of what you're doing around ARM64. So that's actually it's pretty awesome to hear it being used that way, and especially having been involved, like I said, seed evolved through multiple iterations of our platform. You mentioned something I want to go back to earlier. Talking about the CNI work that's being done to make jails more sort of cloud native accessible, right? What about other types of kind of cloud software stacks? Like what's going on in that? Like what can you talk about in terms of virtualization and those sorts of things? Like we know virtualization's been a hot topic this year. Like what does FreeBSD give us from that perspective?
Yeah, so FreeBSD's native hypervisor is called Beehive. It's been in our tree and supported for quite some time. But the ARM64 port of Beehive is a relatively recent addition, and so it is it's functional and is making great progress. It's not quite it's not yet available in a release and sort of fully production quality, but we absolutely are moving ahead with having Beehive support for ARM64. Greg, I don't know if you have any other comments you wanted to bring up on that.
Yeah, you mentioned the Open Container Initiative. So there is a official Open Container Initiative working group that Ed participates in, and there are a number of developers from the FreeBSD community and kind of beyond that are active building a OCI runtime extension for FreeBSD. So this will be the third operating system supported by the Open Container Initiative. So there's currently a Windows runtime extension and a Linux runtime extension. So, and we just opened the call for testing for the Podman. So using Podman on top of the FreeBSD runtime extension. So
that'll actually be great from a user experience perspective, right? Like being able to, for people who would be coming, it makes it, kind of really easier to make that transition if you have kind of the same tooling. So that's great.
Yeah, it's very exciting, and we haven't established an exact version 1 date for the runtime extension, but my hope and belief is that Q4, Q1 timeframe is sort of what we're aiming for that. So it's a very exciting time to be. And the interesting thing is, Ed mentioned jails. Jails have been, a lightweight container technology. They've been around forever. They were the first real container solution. And the OCI runtime extension for FreeBSD hooks into jails. So it takes advantage of that native compartmentalization capability and really just upgrades it to take advantage of these really amazing industry standards that the Open Container Initiative has been driving, which is really very consistent with the deliberate, considered, long-term development strategy that the FreeBSD community has. We want to make sure that new approaches and new technology that we embrace is going to be things that we can support over the long haul, because that's what our users expect. They expect rock solid stability across releases, and it's hard to do that when you're swapping things out from release to release. And so this is a really exciting time for FreeBSD.
Yeah, it's funny. There's another parallel there, I think, to Ampere. We talk about our like the QoS, or how we deliver consistent performance in terms of how we architected the cores and the caches and all that sort of stuff. And it's from what I get, that same sort of thread, right? Like consistency, stability, throughout the change as you guys evolve the software, and being able to do it kind of in line with as little disruption as possible. There's something to be said for that. It's very operator centric, if I may, if I may say, right? Like,
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, and that's you can tell that that the development of FreeBSD has been heavily influenced by operators, because its operation is so efficient, right? The things that might require 4, 5, 6 commands that could change from release to release in some other ecosystems is a single command, and it's the exact same command that it's been for as long as people have been using FreeBSD for certain workloads. So I agree with you there. I think the sort of operator centric mentality is very present in FreeBSD and in Ampere, and users love the combination. We looked at some statistics to get a sense of use of FreeBSD on Arm64, and we're currently on release 14 for FreeBSD. It was production ready, Ed, keep me honest, at release 12, right? So I think I have that right.
So FreeBSD 12 was the first release that we had with Arm64 support included.
Yeah.
FreeBSD 13 is the first release where it was a tier 1 architecture, and then FreeBSD 14 is our most current release.
And across those releases, use of FreeBSD, and it's difficult because FreeBSD, like most open source communities, doesn't have a callback. We're not tracking usage. So
you're not deep in telemetry.
No, so it's a bit anecdotal, but what we can say is that as support for Arm64 on FreeBSD has improved, use has increased. It's now up somewhere around 20%. And I think it's a lot because of this. People want to be able to run these demanding workloads as efficiently as possible. The cloud is not cheap, right? Just compute in general is not cheap. So if you can squeeze more sessions out of the same hardware by a combination of
right, like if we're talking about cloud, right, like more performance,
more IO, more database lookups, right? Whatever the metric is for the workload, but more for the same or less, that's a win, right? And as a tree hugger myself, it's also a win for our planet, which makes me happy. I mean, I think, Ed, you'll remember the details probably better than I, but I think some of just to give you a sense of like where FreeBSD and Ampere are aligned on this question of efficiency, some users of FreeBSD are getting to a point where they can support some significant number of video streaming sessions on the amount of power it takes to light a light bulb. so it's really, you know, an area where we're very aligned with the Ampere in terms of,
you know, you're skirting. I don't even know if it's worth answering the next question after that I was going to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway because we've basically already been talking about it. Is so, you know, what is the user experience of FreeBSD and Ampere CPUs? Sounds like it's pretty much, you know, the same or what they would expect. But what do you guys have to say about that?
Yeah, I think broadly speaking, I mean, we consider it a tier one architecture. The package collection, almost all of our packages are available on ARM64. So really, I think that's one of the reasons that the uptake of ARM64 in cloud environments on FreeBSD has been so high, because it's you know, the ARM64 ecosystem and FreeBSD have really made great strides in sort of making sure that everything just works. And so if you have a application stack that was running on another architecture and you want to bring it up on ARM64, generally speaking, it's, you know, it's a very smooth transition.
Got it. That's you know, that's pretty great to hear because well, you know, as you know, it's nice to hear that software just works, right? Like going back to that operator mentality, it's great when you can plug in stuff, integrate it, and have it all just you know, function or deliver the user experience that you would expect. Yeah, no, that's fantastic to hear. Yeah, so I guess, you know, from that perspective, guys, you know, what about the last thing I'm really thinking about is what about this AI wave, right? Like, I'm sure, you know, it has to have affected the FreeBSD project too. So, like, what can you tell me about, like, what's your position on the current momentum in AI, and where are you? What are you guys doing to participate or be involved in that?
I can get us started, Ed, and then, you know, jump in, please. So, you know, yeah, clearly, you know, AI is a really important workload, and FreeBSD users are very interested in this. Where we are seeing particular interest is AI at the edge. So bringing AI to the data instead of sending the data to the AI. And there's a lot of reasons for that. You know, I think that in general, edge AI is a trend that will become increasing, will gain momentum, you know, as we move forward. I think, you know, a lot of the early AI implementations are sort of experimental. You know, what can this do? How can I use it? And so, you know, doing that in a public cloud, you know, when you're not talking about massive volumes, makes sense. But I think for a lot of organizations, where they really are going to want to deploy AI is deploy it co-load with the data, for privacy, for cost, right? For legal reasons in some cases where you're just not allowed to send that data into a public cloud. And so there's a bunch of companies in the FreeBSD community that are experimenting with this and working on it. You know, obviously, you know, there is, you know, kind of a particular technology architecture that is dominating the AI space right now, and companies in the FreeBSD community are working to make sure that you know, AI models and workloads that are written for this particular architecture can run on FreeBSD, and that's a non-trivial exercise. But you know, we're also very, very interested in the open source and open standards based solutions, which are kind of starting to creep out and challenge the dominant proprietary approach right now, because that's much more consistent with the way we operate. You know, we are all about choice. We are all about open source. You know, obviously BSD is our preferred license, but anything open source that allows people to use the technology in whatever way they want and with whatever other technology they want, and deploy that wherever they want, is very aligned with the ethos of the FreeBSD community. And so you see some of that starting to come online now, and we're really excited about working on that as well. So it's a work in progress, but it's an area of active investigation right now in the community. And I not a week goes by that I don't receive or send a handful of emails on this topic.
Yeah,
what are you seeing from an Ampere perspective? Like how is this shaken out for you guys?
Well, for us, we have an active, kind of role in it, right? Like we're driving to show that, due to the efficiencies of our processors, like for inference workloads, you don't need to utilize a GPU, and you can have in some cases, I think it was almost, it's like you're paying 18% the cost, right? To run the inferencing, so
yeah.
For me personally, like I know we have an AI team internally. We've been working on, accelerating those AI workloads for inference on our chips for quite some time, specifically around, you mentioned the video streaming, a lot of that stuff we've done work with video streaming, audio detection, those sorts of things. For me personally, I find it interesting, having interacted with some of the different cloud teams talking about, who build AI as a service, and understanding kind of how, in some cases, Wild West the whole idea of AI is, how people are curating stacks for that, and what it really means to be an AI product, right? Like it's not. To me, that's the part that I find interesting, because at the end of the day, it's all curated software. It's curated software, curated operational practices, best practice that are packaged and delivered, as a cloud service, right? And how, in the choices, we talk about choice, the choices that people make when they build their software stacks, you know what I mean? That can ultimately lead to greatly different experiences, right? So I always find that stuff fascinating.
Yeah.
But yeah, the key takeaway for me though is kind of how, a lot of it's not really defined. A lot of, like you said earlier, Greg, there was a lot of experimentation that was done in the early days, and then I like to equate it. There's a level of like, you start out experimenting small until you need to get more sophisticated, right? You start using like schedulers and all those sorts of things. So there's definitely, to me, a similarity to like early cloud infrastructure days, where we had like, virtualization on top of HA clusters versus more OpenStack models. It was just like this change of how we had to think about, what it is that we're really trying to do, and do some of the old ways matter anymore, and there's, to me, at some level, a feel of that going on, because, let's be real, a lot of the workload came out of HPC. You know what I mean? Like the style of workload is characteristic similar to things like HPC. So there's a lot of time, like not, sophistication with that style of workload usually comes over time, right? So I think it's just, it's gonna be interesting what happens. Ampere is, trying to do our part and allow for a much more efficient, green option in the case of running your inference for your AI workload. So that's where I would say my standing opinion is. But anyway, thanks, gentlemen. I'd like to thank you for your time here today. I appreciate taking the time, and as always, it's great working with the folks at the FreeBSD Foundation. And as a FreeBSD fanboy, I appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thank you, Peter.
And I'd like to say, everybody, please check out, freebsd.org, download the latest release. Ed can attest there's some, you can get it in different clouds on the Ampere platforms, or where you can find the Ampere platforms. And please check out both their developer resources and the developer resources you can find here at Ampere Computing, at our community.amperecomputing.com site, to check out and participate within our community, and engage with them, engage with the experts. And thanks again, guys. We'll talk again soon.
See See you later.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.